This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. I'm Charity Nebbe. It was a tough spring for many fruit crops, but if you are lucky enough to have fruit set this year, there are some things you can and probably should do right now to make the most of your crop. Randall Voss, Iowa State University Extension Horticulture Specialist, is here with me today. Hello, Randall.
Good morning.
So it was a tough spring in a lot of ways. Give me kind of an overview of what you're hearing. I know a lot of people have said very few cherries this year. We have one cherry tree with a crop, one without.
Okay.
And they're 10 feet apart.
Yep.
What else are you hearing?
Yeah, it's pretty variable. We had some fruit set issues in apples. A lot of peaches got nailed by, cold weather. So it's just pretty variable, basically. So some people have a crop, some don't. And kind of like what you said, I have an apple tree that has plenty of fruit and one that doesn't. So it's just hit or miss.
All right. So once you survive the spring weather and you do have fruit set, pest management is obviously something that a lot of people think about.
Yep.
And with pest management, you should have already started, right?
Yeah. You don't want to wait till the bugs are in the apples to start controlling them. It's a proactive thing, So it's you should have started right after bloom, basically.
All right, so we'll kind of set that aside today. But when you do have fruit set, it can be easy. You get really excited. You see all that fruit on the tree or on the bush, whatever. If there's too much fruit, that can be a problem. Why?
Yeah, one of my pet peeves, and I'm not here to air pet peeves, but, people have their peach trees that are loaded, and then they say, well, there's so much that the tree broke, I'm like, well, you have a choice on that, right? And so, especially with tree fruits, especially apples and so forth, they can get to this biennial bearing where they're loaded one year, not the next. But, you really should consider thinning off fruit. And an easy way to look at it is, you should be able to put your hand between them, basically. No fruit should be touching on peaches and pears and apples. You should be able to put your hand between them. And it's for the health of the tree. If crops are overloaded, they're less likely to produce next year. They're less likely to be fully cold hardy, And then also just the flavor. If you overwhelm a tree with fruit, the fruit's going to be lower in sugar. It's not going to taste quite as good. And I mean, most of us don't harvest 100% of the fruit anyway in our home apple trees or whatever. So you might as well try and get it more even each year by thinning in the heavy years. All
right. So that's something we can do right now. It's not too late.
Nope.
How do you do it? What's your technique?
Yeah, it's one of those good old hand labor things. So if you got a gargantuan apple tree, probably not going to happen. But, in the commercial peach world, they actually have like these long sticks with little rubber tees on them that they rub them off. But just doing it by hand. And, some people probably have already had some fruit drop. I know I have. It's called June drop in apples. And basically, some of the apples aren't fully pollinated, or in the case of my peaches, some maybe got some plum curculio, which is an insect. They'll just naturally drop off because the plant can kind of sense, hey, something's wrong with these fruits, and they just drop them off already. And so that's pretty natural, and usually they wouldn't ripen well anyway, but basically just going in by hand, there's not a great way to do other than that for the homeowner.
Well, is there anything that we need to be concerned about if we do go in by hand and pull these fruits off? Could we be damaging the tree if we are too rough with that?
Yeah, I wouldn't do when it's wet out. Obviously you're not going to be out in a day like yesterday in your tree anyway, but once you get later in the summer, like fire blight's less of a concern for apples and so forth. So just wait till it's likely to be dry for a while, and I think you should be fine. So.
All right. Let's talk about small fruits, because that's kind of a different thing. You don't want to fist between raspberries.
Yeah.
So what do you need to think about with smaller fruits?
Yeah, raspberries, strawberries, not much you can do at this point, right? You want to prune them in the winter and so forth, but there are a couple things we can kind of do for planning for next year, and that's kind of what fruit thinning does, and something I didn't mention earlier is right now the buds on an apple tree and a peach tree and a grapevine and all that, in basically June, July this year, those buds are determining, am I going to be a flower bud or not? And so if we overload our crops, they're going to be, stressed, so to speak. And that's one of the reasons, there's several, why they may not produce as good next year is those buds on the plant now are in a stressful situation, so they're less likely to be fruit next year. And so that when people say, oh, there weren't many flowers this year, well, that was already determined last year, and so we're just trying to manage and keep the conditions as good as possible to get fruit buds for next year.
All right, so if you thin your fruit, you can kind of step out of that boom-bust cycle that so many fruit trees naturally fall into.
Yep. And so for brambles, as well as talk raspberries and blackberries and stuff. Raspberries, we just let them ride. You might need to thin your rows up a little bit and really focus the growth on the ones that are actually in the row. Hopefully you have rows. If not, it's a pain to pick. But blackberries and black raspberries, we actually want to pinch them once they get 4 feet tall or so, because they actually produce better on side shoots, what we call laterals, than the main stalk. So I've already pinched my blackberries this year. Okay,
and tell me what pinching means.
So basically, once they get to again, hopefully you have a trellis, maybe don't, but once they get to that trellis height, you just pinch off 6 inches or so, and that will stimulate them to put on side branches, which is what we want.
Okay, but you're pinching your fingers together as if that's an easy thing to do. These are thorny brambles. How do you do it?
I just do it by hand, but I have thornless blackberries though, so you can use a pruners, whatever. You want to try and get them when they're still fairly succulent tissues, so not like that hard woody. So that's why you want to get them when they're maybe just past where the trellis is, because if you dig into that woody stuff, it's going to be harder to tip, and also you're not going to get them to branch as well, probably.
All right. I'm still going to wear gloves.
That's fine,
All right. What about with strawberries?
So strawberries, I think a misconception about strawberries or missed practice is after you're done cropping them, which, we had a fairly early spring this year, so like my strawberries are starting to peter out, mow them. We want to get rid of all that old foliage that gets diseased and so forth, and a lot of people don't do that, and it's really a missed opportunity to clean up the patch, maybe get off some of that old diseased foliage, and set the plants up for next year. And so in a couple of weeks, I'll be just drive my lawnmower over my strawberry patch, get off that diseased foliage.
That seems so brutal.
It does. It's one of those immediate gratification things, though. You see it and it looks, it's instantly done. But you get a flush of growth later on that's clean. And if we don't do that, you can spread more disease. But I will say, make sure you water, because suddenly those crowns of those plants, when you mow them off, are exposed to full sun. They were kind of in the shade, so just make sure you water.
All right, and let's say you've got a strawberry bed in a raised bed.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Weed whacker or do it by hand. I definitely would do it though. It's worth the time in terms of disease carryover, because most people, me included, at home, I don't want to mess with fungicides and that kind of stuff in my small strawberry patch. So getting as many leaves off after harvest is better.
All right. Well, let's talk about grapevines. With grapevines, there may be an opportunity for thinning this time of year. Why would you do that?
Yeah, so I was just at a vineyard right before I got here, and if your shoots are 2-3 feet long by this time of year, that's kind of a sign that they can handle the crop that's on them, right? If you look at a grapevine, they have tendrils on them. If there's lots of new leaves and lots of tendrils, that's a sign that you don't need to do any thinning. In some cases, I was just in a situation this morning where one of the varieties, the shoots were not even a foot long, and the tendrils, which are the little grabby things, were very small. And so that's a sign that the crop is too much and it's inhibiting growth, and it's not good for the plant. It's not good for the fruit quality. And so if you have shoots that are probably less than a foot long right now and the tendrils are short, you probably want to pull off some clusters. And most grapevine shoots have 2 clusters. Pull off one, something like that. And that will help the plant for this year, have better quality fruit, and then help it for next year.
How long do grapevines live?
Yeah, we're having some issues in our 20-year-old vineyards right now. We're having some trunk disease and they're having to retrain them. But I mean, there's vineyards that are 50 years old in Michigan and so forth. So usually it's a matter of the disease buildup. It reaches a point where it's just time to start over. But a lot of our growers that are having like 20-year-old vines or 15-year-old vines are just starting to retrain. So just a sucker from the ground, they're retraining.
Okay. And you said 50. I mean, does that feel like the upper limit?
Probably. A lot of times it's just like people get tired of the variety, or in the commercial world, the market changes, right? So, but yeah, you should be able to get a life's worth, basically, an adult life's worth out of a grapevine if you take care of it well. But that also involves possibly retraining it from the ground many years or every so often.
All right. And with grapes, of course, over 50 years, a lot of things can change in the environment around those grapes. What are some of the things that people need to think about just as far as shading and making sure that the grapevine has the opportunity to produce as well as it can?
Yeah. So, most people probably leave too many shoots on a grapevine. Grapevine pruning is very different from apple pruning. In a grapevine, we're pulling off like 90% of the growth every year, and people get mortified when they do that, and so they overcrop them, leave too many shoots. And so, in some of those situations, I always say I'm not asking people to do math here, but let's say your vines are 10 feet long, you should have somewhere around 5 shoots per foot, right? So around 50 shoots, something like that. And so that's kind of a number to look at. Is if you have more than that, you're probably shading too much. But a lot of people, I would say some people in their backyard maintain plants the way they like them to look, maybe than what's better for the plant. And that's their choice, right? That's not how I roll. That's not how commercial growers roll. But they like plants to be in a box, right? And so they like the grapevine shoots because they're trailing. They're going to sprawl.
Pretty,
yeah, but they like them to be cut perfectly and can understand that from an aesthetic standpoint. But the problem when you start chopping a vine is they'll put out side shoots, and those side shoots pop out right where the fruit is, causing a lot of shade.
Okay,
so
you don't want that.
No.
All right, Randall Voss, Iowa State University Extension horticulture specialist. For more gardening information and tips, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Find out more at iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach.